S&M Hit Squad, and welcome back, guys. Here's your boy Sean.
And your girl Mel.
Yes,
Welcome
guys.
S&M
We are
Squad.
back, all right? The boxer no one could touch explained.
Okay.
How? No one can touch him?
Okay, let's
All
go.
right, let's see. So, guys, we found this inside the comment section, and we appreciate it. But go ahead and smash that like button and turn that notification bell so you guys be notified next time we upload. Here we go, babe.
They called him the Untouchable, and for good reason. Nicolino Locche once sent a man flying into the ropes without ever having touched him. Like a human double end bag, Locche possessed next-level timing and head movement that made him nearly impossible to hit.
Whoa!
He won the junior welterweight title by frustrating his competitors so much he quit between rounds. Locche would end his career with a staggering record of 117 wins out of his 136 fights.
Wow.
It's actually a huge pet peeve of mine when fighters execute good head movement but don't use it to set up any counters. Sometimes they'll even let themselves get put into a bad position, wasting a number of opportunities to counter. However, Locche did do this, but he was so good that his head movement almost became a weapon all on its own, serving to frustrate and tire his opponents. His head movement was so advanced, so pristine, that he didn't even really need to combine it with footwork. He could just plant himself in front of his opponent and dare them to hit him. And in the end, Locche's head movement never left him in a bad position because, like Floyd Mayweather,
Swinging on air.
Locche was comfortable in all positions, even those that would normally be considered abysmal to most boxers. For example, both Mayweather and Locche were happy to willingly go back into a corner, even walking themselves there if the opponent insisted. And just like Mayweather, Locche could get away with this because of his deep understanding of head movement and the Philly shell defense. What this meant was that Locche was never at a huge disadvantage, whether he was at long range, mid-range, or close range. Any position, any stance, Locche had an answer to any punch. And despite having a ridiculously low KO to win ratio, Locche is still far more entertaining to watch than the vast majority of knockout artists. And pretty much for the same reason as you watch a tightrope walker. So without further ado, let's break down Locche's defensive tactics to see exactly what made him so untouchable. Locche's defense began and ended with his ability to effortlessly manipulate distance in any direction. The way that he could move over, under, around, or even into his opponent's punches, it almost seemed like he knew what his competitors would throw before they did. One of the most powerful ways that Locche truly confounded his opponents was not to evade, but instead to close off lines of attack. And he did this by moving his head towards his opponent's punches, both stifling his opponent's assault and shutting down any follow-up blows. Moving into punches is incredibly counterintuitive, and many beginners struggle with it, as they naturally want their head to be as far from their opponent's punches as possible. But Locche is the perfect example of how this tactic can greatly reduce the risk for a boxer. By moving in and positioning his body in specific ways, Locche only left one or two openings that his opponents had as a reply. And this in turn made these punches easier to predict and avoid. Of course, Locche didn't simply walk into his opponent's punches, he moved inside of them to achieve specific positions. For instance, Locche's first tactic was to duck in and press his shoulder to his opponent's shoulder. This cut off space for their attack from that same side, drastically limiting their offense. Sometimes, he would even roll his shoulder directly into the opponent's rear hand attacks, almost like an advancing shoulder roll. In this instance, Locche's lead shoulder would be pressed against the opponent's rear shoulder. However, this did leave some room for looping rights, and Locche would sometimes have to spend his right arm controlling his opponent's left. So it figures that Locche's favorite position was to place his lead shoulder against his opponent's lead shoulder, left to left. From this position, Locche both blocked his opponent's view and momentarily smothered most of their weapons.
Wow.
Unfortunately, one of the few openings that was still available was Locche's left temple. But fortunately, he knew this and had the perfect response ready. Since I mentioned the Philly shell earlier, it should come as no surprise that Locche had an absolutely beautiful shoulder roll and counter. As the opponent's punch came in, Locche would shrug his shoulder up and turn his body to deflect the punch away, and then return a hard counter. Like James Toney, Locche was an expert at tailoring his shoulder roll to deal with any kind of punch. If you've ever seen a boxer attempt a shoulder roll but get caught by an overhand, it's likely because they only know how to shoulder roll crosses and don't really understand the nuances of rolling different kinds of punches. By leaning back at the correct angle, Locche created the perfect slope with his body to let opponents' punches just slide off. This nuance is one of the reasons the Philly shell is such a hard system to learn, but Locche was all about nuance. So after rolling his opponent's right, he of course chose a well-tailored punch to follow up with, be it a rear hook, cross, or uppercut. Locche also employed this same smothering tactic with low-line head movement. As the opponent came in, he would drop low and run his shoulder into his opponent's hip. Once again, this completely cut off several avenues of attack. And once again, Locche preferred to cross over his left shoulder, placing it against his opponent's left hip. From this position, his competitors had barely any room to operate. Realistically, all they could do was try to readjust through footwork, or attempt a lead hook or uppercut. But with barely any distance to build up momentum, these attacks often lacked power. But Locche's counter from this position didn't. He liked to take opponents unaware, popping up to deliver a powerful left hook. Although he usually used the hip position to transfer to even better positions. Locche would build on this position by sliding his head from his opponent's hip up to the outside of their rear shoulder. And this was a very advantageous angle. Like a duck under in wrestling, Locche could come up from behind his opponent, both smothering their work and forcing them out of alignment. Muay Thai's most untouchable fighter, Locche, uses the same tactic to escape corners today, and like Locche would shuffle away to either side, whether escaping to the inside or the outside. The opponent was forced to readjust their stance, giving Locche all the time he needed to exit to mid-ring or counterattack. During any given exchange, Locche could employ one or all of these tactics. So we've covered what Locche did, but now it's time to cover how he was able to do it. Most fighters would find themselves running their heads into punches, even attempting to emulate Locche. So how the hell did the man get away with embarrassing high-level fighters? It all has to do with what, in my opinion, is the single most important element of fighting: timing. And when it comes to Locche, his timing wasn't all about natural reflexes. Locche was arguably just as good as Joe Frazier at completely getting inside of an opponent's rhythm.
Wow.
Like the perfect dance partner, Locche could move with his opponent with little to no delay, as if he knew what his opponent was going to do even before he did it.
That's what it seems like.
Matching his speed and position perfectly, Locche would transform into the mirror image of his competitors, staying in sync as if he was their shadow. But this shadow boxer could hit back. The fact is, many times Locche did know exactly where and when his opponent would strike, because he had already baited them into moving precisely how he wanted them to. All he had to do was wait to spring the trap. And the key to any good trap is bait.
Ain't no
In between evasions, Locche would move into a position where he had a clear line of sight on his opponent, and from there, he would pause. This slight pause both gave the opponent a tempting target and allowed Locche to look for the subtle movements of his opponent's body that would signal what punch was coming next.
Let's go, Locche.
Most boxers develop the ability over time to notice these telegraphic signals, but by resetting positions to give himself a clear line of sight to his opponent's body after every evasion, Locche maximized his ability to pick up on these tells and incentivized his competitors to strike at that exact moment. If you're having trouble noticing these mid-evasion pauses, try noticing when Locche makes a small movement before an even bigger evasion. It's a lot like a swimmer coming up to breathe before diving back under. Smothering an opponent's attacks to limit their offensive options to a handful of predictable punches. Keeping his opponent in a clear line of sight in between evasions. Pausing to bait his competitors into punching when and how he wanted them to, so he could better predict those punches. These were the tools in Locche's bag of tricks, and by combining them, he was able to pull off some truly insane, incredible stunts.
Oh yeah.
He could evade punches by turning his head, letting them skim past his cheek.
Damn, that's
Or he could tilt his head, letting the punch just graze his temple. Or he could move with his opponent's punches, staying just ahead of them. This is a level of precision very few fighters have ever achieved, Muhammad Ali and Canelo Alvarez being a few. While his lack of power and limited offense stopped him from becoming as great as he could have been, he may well hold the title of having the greatest head movement of all time.
absolutely.
But I'm curious what you think, so let us know in the comments who you think had better or just crazier head movement. To learn the tactics of Locche and other great fighters, you can check out my books on defense, footwork, and power, linked below. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you
All right, David.
Locche.
Wow.
All right, I like this guy.
Yes,
Because
me too.
it's hard to hit him.
Yeah.
You know, and then he's got this technique where, like, he can time his opponent,
Yeah.
and he's learning how quick they are,
Yeah.
and it's like you just swinging on air. At this
It
point.
reminds me of The Matrix. Remember when The Matrix, how he dodged all those bullets? What was it, Neo?
Neo.
Yeah, that's what Locche reminds me of. That's who
Yeah.
Locche reminds me of.
Yeah.
Very quick,
He has some good, like
amazing
his
techniques.
footwork. His footwork is pretty good.
And like I could see in, other boxers
Yeah.
where they got that technique from now. So now we know where they get
Yes.
it from, who they get it from.
He was definitely hard to hit.
Okay.
And, like the guy said, he lacked power. He wasn't like a hard, heavy hitter. But, it was, you just couldn't hit him.
Yeah.
So on the scorecards, you're going to win. You landed no punches, but you threw almost 80 of them.
Yeah.
And none of them landed. That's
None of them
crazy.
landed.
Wow, this guy was definitely skillful.
Yeah, most
He definitely
definitely.
knew what he was doing in that ring.
That's my first time hearing of him.
That's
So.
Locche. All right, so we got
Okay.
ourselves a new boxer, guys. Thanks to you
Locche.
guys. We appreciate it. All right, go ahead and smash that like button, give this video a big fat thumbs up, and also get inside the comment section. We appreciate the love and support, guys. We need our next video.
Absolutely.
All right, drop it off inside the comment section, the title or the link, whatever makes you guys feel comfortable. All right, we
All right.
appreciate it. That's our time. We getting up out of here.
Peace.
Peace.